Now, Patrick Jephson, of course, we've had plenty of times on Paul Murray Live, and he's, of course, the man who was the former private secretary to Princess Diana, and he's written today in the Daily Mail an incredible piece which is about the connection that has been built, the bonds that have been built, the unity that is amongst us, be it you sitting at home on the lounge, be it the people in the queues, or be it something that's in the air right now. It means that we want to be connected to something. It's an excellent piece. We'll put the links up on our Facebook page later. But you can feel it, and I think you've distilled it beautifully in words.
Sure, thanks, Paul. I mean, it is something that we're told, at the outset of this week. It's all about continuity. The Queen is dead. Long live the King. It carries on. It's the envy of the world. We can swap head of state without a ripple. Not many countries can do that, and I mean, just for good measure, in Britain they swapped head of government as well.
They did, absolutely.
It was a real twofer. And I was expecting to talk mostly about continuity and I suppose the constitutional aspect of it. But being here, and I live in America most of the time, so being dropped back into London during this incredible week has given me the chance to see the place with new eyes. And what I've noticed is among the crowds, and I mean, they're saying it's going to be full. There are a million people expected here, maybe more. But you can't avoid them. Just to get here, you have to walk through them. And the spirit, the atmosphere, the attitude, the emotion that you pick up is not of strangers. It's not even of mourners. It's of people who are meeting new friends. It's as if they're seeing their fellow citizens with new eyes. And I think you're right, Paul. You don't have to be here to feel it. You are part of that community if you are watching these extraordinary events and feel an ounce of emotion for what is happening.
You touched on the politics of changing a head of government. Obviously, we've changed the head of state here. None of this is easy in terms that it's a fraught relationship with the Union. I mean, there are issues in Scotland, and Northern Ireland for many decades has had challenges. I've watched as the new King has had to navigate all of that at a time of great personal loss. It's also a pretty fractious family. You know that better than anyone, having worked for Diana, the Princess of Wales. And then, a few backbiting comments may be attributed to this person, that, but we haven't seen them put a foot wrong as a family, as well as him navigating all these new duties of state. What do you make of the last pretty tumultuous week and a bit?
I think, Peter, you put your finger on it when you use the word duty. We talk about service. They are here as servants of the public, or we're all engaged in some way of serving the country or serving good causes. But for these people, their lives are duty. Duty is the stuff you don't want to do. Duty is the stuff that you do because you have to, not because you feel you ought to or want to. Now, the King has, in his opening tour around the United Kingdom, very much put duty first. And I think that has been really impressive. People have seen it. And it's a good start because, if nothing else, as a head of state, as a constitutional monarch, you have to be seen to be doing your duty every day.
Also, I was thinking about this, that at one point in time, the government here had a Minister for Loneliness. And there are a lot of people in our country who live by themselves, whose family has changed over the years. And often I think, when I'm reflecting on this week, is that there are things that bind us together and there are things that make us feel like we're not alone. Now, yes, there's a fair amount of bread and circuses, and yes, there's a fair amount of continuing the traditions, and yes, there's a fair amount of, depending on how important you are, you get access to this, that and the other. But what I see in the streets of London and what I see in the comments that we get back from our viewers is a lovely reminder about being connected to something else. And at a time when cost of living's terrible here, it's terrible in the United States, it's terrible in Australia. Literally, the presidents of Russia and China were carving up the world in the past week. Police officers being assaulted here in London. So it can become very easy for people who are by themselves or feel that the world that they love is slipping away from them. So in some ways, a final gift, I think, was the Jubilee in July, to see this incredible surge of goodwill, but then also to see this wonderful bonding in a time we all know was going to happen. I think it helps provide and continue to be a North Star for people, as people have said of the Queen in the past. What do you think?
I think, Paul, the key element of that has been ritual. we've watched extraordinary examples of ritual and pomp and circumstance and pageantry, and it's part theatre, but it has a serious purpose. You know, this is a tribal event. We are the tribe. This is the head of the tribe who has died. We've got a new head of the tribe. And these are tribal rituals, things built up over centuries and centuries. And they look a bit absurd sometimes, but they do perform a very valuable function. They help us, especially lonely people who aren't able to share the experiences so much with their neighbours and friends. They enable us all to participate. We're part of these rituals. And I think we have to give them full credit for that.
Well,
I'm just picking up on that though. One of the criticisms of the royal family is they're aloof, they're out of touch, they live a life of privilege. Certainly the last bit there is true. What struck me is I've watched a lot of the interviews on our network and elsewhere. There are people coming to London, British people, this is their first trip to London, and I've watched middle-aged and elderly people have not been to London who are coming down here. This is low-income Brits. So this idea that somehow only the upper echelons of society support the monarchy, the reach into ordinary Britain is extraordinary.
Yes.
Why is that? What's the magic of that?
Well, I think it's probably this, Peter, that the less you have in the world, the more important it is to feel you are attached to something significant. And these are people, as you say, who are very often not blessed with material possessions, but do have enormous reserves of character and decency and patriotism. And this is a focus. The royal family, the monarchy, when it works as it's supposed to, is the focus of all the things that we hope we aspire to, all our best attributes. That's why, you know, the laws dispense the name of the crown. We just saw the armed forces of Australia. They don't fight Australia's enemies, they fight the Queen's enemies. And that is very important to make that distinction, that this is an institution that exists above politics and therefore can be the focus of unity, focus of affection from people who are otherwise disenchanted with the world.
so there's been so many different moments that all felt huge in and of themselves, and they've all been deeply family-related moments for a while.
Some practicing going on behind us, I think.
I was going to say, we love it again, the changing of the guard. Every time people will travel from the world, I mention it every day because I know people would very much enjoy being able to see that, so you can watch that live. But Patrick, obviously we've seen already, they've all, the key members of the royal family have already had their moments to be standing vigil in Scotland or standing vigil in Westminster Hall. We've seen them interact with personalities. But what do you think will be the types of these things that bond them in the final moments after all of the ceremony back at Windsor, when it is just the key members of the family as Prince Philip is brought back together, and that is literally the family funeral?
Well, I think like any organisation that is going through a crisis, and this is a crisis, a well-handled crisis, but a crisis nonetheless, which is reinventing itself, which is having to rediscover its core principles, what really makes it tick, what keeps it together. I think there will be a human drawing together, a sense that old disagreements, petty bickering can be set aside, at least for now. The honeymoon will end. You know, boring life will re-establish itself, and events will intervene. But for right now, the royal family has an opportunity to look at itself and say, this is what we're here for. We'd better get on and do it and look good while we do that.
Let me just ask you about Paul's point, forecast out now, where to from here? We've got a new king. We've seen, for the first time, we didn't think we'd see it so clearly and early, but the two boys that you know well, Prince William and Prince Harry, have been together for the ceremonies. They'll be there together again tomorrow. Harry's book's due out by the end of the year. There's talk it'll be pushed off. There's no yet talk of cancellation. The mood in the British newspaper media class is it should be scrapped. I've spoken to people on this program with connections to the royal family who hope it is scrapped. That's probably the best way back in terms of a genuine rapprochement and not just a bit of truce theatre for the next couple of days. What do you think will happen?
Well, I think the world of publishing, particularly royal publishing, is a bit of a shark tank. I mean, you can't just not publish a book that contracts exist for. Huge amounts of money have allegedly already exchanged hands. The whole issue of rapprochement between Harry and William has been slightly sidetracked by what the King said in his very first speech as King, that, my love for Harry and Meghan is unquestioned as they build their new lives overseas. They're over there. And we here, the core royal family, the working royal family, I think you'll hear that phrase used more and more. Working members of the royal family are the ones who actually matter now. The rest are, okay, we love them, but they're not central
So
to
you're
the role.
saying that sort of, that's King code for saying, whilst there might be then skirmishes with the California family, don't let that distract you from the institution here.
I think what we'll see is the institution sails on. Harry and Meghan have made their own decision. They've gone off to do something else. The institution won't wait for them. The institution will love them, but it won't say, you're welcome back any time. The institution has a job to do, and it's going to get on with it.
But I've got to say that, look, I know that there's a great interest on the internet for anyone who wants to kick Harry and Meghan as hard as they possibly can. And they don't do things to ingratiate themselves, and they do things to annoy people, right?
They don't help themselves.
No.
They don't help themselves.
No, 100%. And I know how many of you, I won't use the H word, but not a big fan, right? But I also think that sometimes it feels like we overdo that. Sometimes it feels like we are searching for the latest example of the thing which sets us all back off to our corners to carry on about again. So, today, were they or weren't they miffed to be invited or not invited to this? Were they or weren't they miffed about, the titles, all the rest of it here? I just think that it'll be interesting to see how Charles deals with it. As you say, in that speech, he was absolutely clear. Don't have this hope that they're coming back. Don't have this hope. Don't have this expectation that there's some sort of sliding doors alternate reality. They've made their choice. So stop searching for things that remind us they made a choice.
Yeah, they made their choice. But also, just from a presentational point of view, if you don't like the fact that people are talking about internal bickering or feuds or looking for offence, then do things, good things that we can talk about instead. That's the way the media works.
But a lot of the time, it's what they have put into the public domain that's causing a reaction, Paul. It's not the usual palace stairs gossip. It's contributions directly from them in interviews and in interviews.
Yeah, 100%. That's my point, which is, just like a president, prime minister, the bully pulpit, all the rest of it, as it's called in different places around the world, you have the capacity to change the subject. You have the capacity to move on to something else. Patrick, speaking of, thank you very much for the conversation, please. We'll check this out. We'll make sure that it's all up on our different websites, all the rest of it. What a thrill to talk to you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.